Senate Republican Leader Rob Ortt. Happy to be joined here by my colleagues from the Republican Conference to talk again about this crisis that continues to impact New York State and continues to grow because of the failure of the Democratic policies of open borders and sanctuary cities. And those really are the two driving forces behind this crisis, where we have illegal migrants being shipped and bused and transported. We're talking about whether to house them in school gymnasium or jail or large parking lots or any number of college campuses. The truth is we don't know. We don't know. It is a crisis of and a failure of democratic policies, again, of open borders and sanctuary cities. And there's really no plan about how we're going to deal with it today and how we're going to deal with it in the future, especially with the expiration of Title 42, which unfortunately, despite her visit to DC, the governor still has not asked to be reinstated. I don't think she's even said Title 42, which is very disappointing to me. Our conference has sent a letter to the Comptroller's office asking Comptroller DiNapoli for a full accounting of every public dollar that is being spent on this crisis currently. This is very similar to what we did during COVID, where we believe the governor, I think when she was newly elected, talked about a new era of transparency. Well, didn't work out so well in the budget. Let's try it on a second time here. Let's get some transparency around the idea of how much money, where is it going, who's receiving the funding. When I talk to my local county officials, none of them believe that they will not be on the hook for some of these costs. It's almost impossible to actually believe that there will not be at least ancillary costs that they will then be responsible for. But also, we just put $1 billion in the state budget. Where is that going? How is it being used? What vendors are getting paid, whether it's a hotel, a bus company, or anyone else for that matter that might be involved? There should be a full accounting and a trail of these public dollars that New Yorkers are financing as a result of Democrats' policies. We also have a series of new legislation that my conference is going to be rolling out, has introduced already, which I will allow our members to speak on. First up, someone who has introduced a new piece of legislation, I think as of 10 a.m. this morning, from the North Country, and that is Senator Dan Steck.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate everyone's time. When Democrats rushed to declare New York a sanctuary city, they ignored the financial costs and consequences of their actions. They did so despite several warnings from many, including many members of this conference. New York City received, as the leader pointed out, $1 billion in the state budget just 3 weeks ago to manage their own self-inflicted crisis. And despite that, by their own words, they still can't handle this issue. Now Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul are trying to pass the costs onto and responsibilities onto upstate communities, including SUNY campuses. They didn't ask to become havens for migrants or to be inserted into the mayor and governor's mismanagement. If New York City, home to millions and recipient of an extra $1 billion of state aid, can't handle the influx of migrants, there's no way SUNY campuses and upstate communities in New York are equipped for this. The infrastructure and financial resources to handle this issue simply aren't there, especially after the state just pocketed hundreds of millions of dollars from counties in EFMAP funding in their budget that was passed just 3 weeks ago. Passing this crisis on to our taxpayers and our communities is just unacceptable, which is why I'm sponsoring a bill that would prohibit the use of SUNY dorms to house migrants so as to ensure that these campuses remain used for academic purposes. And I'm proud to join my Senate Republican colleagues here today in sending a message to the governor and Mayor Adams that upstate taxpayers should not be responsible for the consequences of their political stunts and grandstanding on this issue. With that said, I'd like to turn this over now to my colleague, Senator Murray, who I believe also has some words to speak on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. I'd like to speak to you about the New Yorkers Combating Alien Recidivism and Ending Sanctuary Act, otherwise known as the New York CARES Act, Senate Bill 6964, which prohibits local government action that impedes or interferes with the enforcement of federal immigration laws. When a location is deemed to be a sanctuary location, that designation prohibits law enforcement from cooperating or working with federal law enforcement officials to enforce federal immigration laws. Now, supporters of sanctuary locations say we shouldn't be turning local law enforcement into federal agents. Well, I have good news for them. That's not what we're doing. Let me give you an example. Robbing a bank is a federal crime because banks are government property and are involved in interstate commerce and trade. Ironically, though, many times it's local law enforcement that ends up catching and arresting the bank robbers. That doesn't mean they suddenly turned into FBI agents. It means they are doing their job and enforcing the laws. Now, every law enforcement official in New York, on every level, from villages and towns to counties and up to the state level, every law enforcement official raises their right hand and swears an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of New York, and to uphold our laws and to protect and serve. What they don't do while taking that oath is pick and choose which laws they will or won't uphold and enforce. And that's because we pass laws for a reason. And that reason is to keep our citizens and our communities safe. Prohibiting local law enforcement from enforcing laws and working with their federal partners does just the opposite. Not only is it sending a terrible message that laws won't be enforced, but it also makes our citizens and our communities less safe. That's why we need to pass the New York CARES Act to let law enforcement do their jobs, to let them protect and serve. I'd like to now turn it over to Senator Lanza from Staten Island.
Thank you and good afternoon, Senator Ort, our leader. Thank you for bringing us together here, and to my colleagues. You know, why are we here today? Because Governor Hochul and her Democrat Party believes it's a good idea to put adults from other countries who are unvetted and unknown into our schools. Not as students, but to live there. It's hard to explain why anyone would want to do this, except that it is only the latest assault and attack on the quality of life here in New York State. It's hard for me, and I've been doing this for quite a while now, it's hard for me to believe that we have come to a point in this country and this state's history that we Republicans need to make it a law, that we need a law to protect New York State students from kindergarten all the way through college, to protect them from the governor of the state, from Democrat mayors from New York City, all the way throughout the state. It's as if we're living in the Twilight Zone. Who would have thought that you would need a law to protect our children from this lunacy? But we do. We do. And we Republicans wonder aloud, what are they doing? And why are the Democrats doing this? Well, you know, the most basic reason is that they detest individual liberty. They hate our very way of freedom. They reject government by the people, for the people, and they replace it with government by them, for them. This is a disgrace, which is why I've introduced legislation that prohibits the governor or any mayor or anyone from the Democratic Party in the state of New York from housing adults in institutions of education. You know, our SUNY system, Senator Steck mentioned, our high schools, our grammar schools, they're there to teach our kids. And I don't mean indoctrinate our kids, which they're doing. Teach our kids. And now they want to put people from other countries who have already demonstrated a propensity to violate our law by coming here in the way they have. They want to house them alongside children and students. They'll spend millions of dollars helping people from other countries come here in violation of a law, and it seems like they won't even spend a penny to help our kids learn. Remember, these are the same folks, the Democrat Party, Governor Hochul, Democrat legislators, both houses, the Assembly, the Senate. These are the same people that locked our kids out of school with absurd, ridiculous, unscientific COVID mandates that did not help a soul and yet hurt thousands. And we're still reeling from these dishonest mandates. You would think they would dedicate themselves to helping the kids that they hurt, and yet one more assault, one more attack. We say it shouldn't stand. We believe, Senator Ort, myself, the Republican delegation, that the people of New York are waking up. We've heard it in our districts. Democrats, Republicans, Independents, people of all walks of life, all colors, all creeds are saying, this is the last straw. We're not going to let you come for our kids. And I'll end with this, for those who will call us names for standing up for our schools and our children. Last week, we all saw footage of moms in the Bronx, elsewhere in New York City, who were protesting this radical policy. And I saw pundits actually criticize those moms who were from different walks of life and different races, and suggest that maybe they weren't decent and compassionate. Well, you know, Governor Hochul, Democratic Party here in New York State and throughout the country, you didn't see what we saw. Here's all we saw. We saw the eyes of mothers who are worried and concerned about their children and what's going to happen to them because of these out-of-control policies. We're here for the moms. We're here for the mothers and for the kids. And we're going to fight with our last breath against these radical, ridiculous, and dangerous policies. And I want to thank Senator Ort for leading the charge. My bill says you can't house adults in schools in New York City. My colleague, Senator White, has introduced the same legislation except statewide, Long Island, all the way to Buffalo, because that's what New York needs. And I thank Senator White for doing that. I especially thank Senator Ort and my colleagues here for standing up for our kids and saying, we're not going to let the Democrats continue to destroy our state.
So, just to close, and then we'll take questions, certainly on topic, and then if there's any off topic. What we've seen across the state in the last several days is county after county, including counties governed by Democrat county executives, and in most situations, Democrat county legislators voting for states of emergency, saying we don't have the resources, the space, the money, nor do we think it's the right philosophy to bring in these illegal migrants into their counties. So this really isn't a Republican-Democrat issue, because across the state, many Democrats have said, can't do it, cannot do it. Broome County. I know I've had conversations with Albany County. In Niagara County, Democratic legislators from Niagara Falls voted for the state of emergency. And the reason I bring that up is because there will be those here in Albany, it's already happened, and I said this last week for those that were here about the moral superiority. People saying that this is morally repugnant to be against, to put these emergency orders in place, to be against open borders, to be against sanctuary city policies and sanctuary state policies, that somehow that's morally repugnant. I find it repugnant when elected leaders, first of all, chastise their constituents, because that's what they're doing. They're calling their constituents morally repugnant because they know better. And I think it's really rich when any elected official moralizes to their constituents about what's right and wrong. I think that's pretty rich. But more importantly, these elected officials, what's repugnant to me in my conference is we took an oath to residents of New York State. The same people we beg for their vote every couple years, we ask for their vote, we solicit their support. That's who we should be working for. And some county elected officials and state officials seem to have forgotten that, or maybe they just have a real loathing for some of their constituents. Maybe they just detest them so much, because that's how it smells and how it smacks me when I see elected officials getting on their moral high horse. If they want to go be an activist somewhere, go with God. But when you're an elected official and you swear an oath, you have to uphold that oath to the people of New York, the people who elected you, the people who pay these ridiculously high taxes, the people who are going to pay the cost that we're asking Comptroller DiNapoli to outline for us. And so the hypocrisy that comes with that, I would just tell any elected official, save it. Save it. I spent a year of my life, and I know colleagues of mine did as well, in other parts of the world trying to bring democracy and freedom to other peoples in other countries. So I've done more than some of my morally superior elected officials have with all their speeches and fancy press conferences and finger wagging at me and their constituents. So we're not cowed by that. We have an obligation to the people of New York, black, brown, white, any color, any ethnicity. And that's who is standing outside that school in New York City. It's Democrats and people from all walks of life who are saying, we're tired, we're poor, we need the resources, we need the help. This is beyond the pale. And it's a failure, again, of the policies at the federal level and now here at the state level and certainly at the city of New York level. So with that, happy to take any questions on this topic.
You mentioned your opposition to migrants being in schools and SUNY campuses. What about federal facilities, Department of Defense facilities, really better field in Brooklyn? Are there any public land, state, federal, local, that you could be okay with?
So I want to parse this a little bit or be able to try to address. So I will speak for myself when I say that my objection is to the idea that we are just bring as many illegal migrants to New York State as possible. As long as that happens, we are going to have a problem with housing these individuals. And telling somebody we're going to put you in a jail or in a public parking lot, I don't know that that's humane for the migrants. Is this the opportunity that they were looking for when they crossed over here to be in Rikers Island, where we don't even want to put criminals? I mean, my Democratic colleagues didn't even want to put hardened criminals in Rikers Island, but they're okay with putting migrants in there so they can sleep at night. So I think our objection is to, as Senator Murray talked about, really at the core of what a sanctuary city is, and I don't know that Mayor Shaheen or others really understand it from the answers I've seen them give. It means we're not going to cooperate with our federal partners to enforce federal immigration laws. That's what it means. And that's why it should be a problem for many counties and people that live in New York. Now, having said that, if the federal government steps in and says we're going to house these folks because of the failure of our border policy, that's their decision. I'm sure my partners at the federal level may have an opinion on how that should work, but that's going to be their call. But I think it misses the point. Yes, we have them here now, but what are we doing to stem the flow? What are we doing to ensure this is not a continual flow, and it's going to be? Because other states and other places are not going to sign up. They're not going to be a sanctuary city or state. And so this is going to land in New York's lap. It's going to land in Chicago's lap. It's going to land in LA, in Seattle, in San Francisco. None of this should be a shock. So I just think we have to take action, whether it's the laws we're talking about, whether it's reasserting Title 42 to stem the flow, because at some point, even these ideas we come up with in the short term are going to eventually start to fill up. And then there's the added bonus, I'll add this, that Mayor Adams said there were like 65,000 migrants at one point in New York. Only half of them are accounted for today in the city of New York. Where are the others? It's a great question that I'm sure a lot of New Yorkers would like to know. Oh, sorry. I should let Eileen do her job. I'm sorry.
Do you support the governor's position that you should legalize the work authorization, expedite that?
So Josh, we talked about this last week. I don't know if you were able to be here, but I said then my concern with that is that the reason it takes so long now is because there's a security and a vetting process that has to happen. You have people who have shown up that we don't know what their background is. We don't know where they're from. We don't know their history. So before we say you're going to be employed on a farm, or you're going to be employed in Walmart, or you're going to be employed wherever, I think we have a right, believe it or not, I think we have a right as Americans, the government has a right to know. They have a right to know a lot about Rob Ort, and I'm a New York resident, and I live here. So I don't know that I'm concerned that by speeding up that work authorization, you can't tell me that we're not losing something on the security piece of that process. And that concerns me greatly.
What do you make of the governor coming back on that point today with Mayor Adams, emphasizing that, making it a really big ask, that she's kind of framing her argument on this conversation?
Okay, so I can only repeat it. This is what I just told you. If she was standing in front of me, I would tell her the same thing. The reason she's doing this, I want to be clear, this seems to be the new national narrative, because I've seen this parroted across national news. We're going to put them on farms. Our farms are struggling for workers, so we have workers. Okay, but we don't know, again, who these folks are. I mean, this is really the epitome of open borders. Not only can you just show up here, but you don't even have to tell us who you are. If you make it here, you've reached home base. It's like home free when you were a kid, when you were playing tag. As long as you got there, you're there. I can't do anything about it. That's nonsense. So I understand what she's trying to do. She wants these people to be employed, because then that's like a solution, right? We've reached a solution. They're working, and they're working on our farms. And our farms do need workers. We all know that. Ironically, the cost of to work on our farms has gone up exponentially because of the policies of Democrats. So I've watched for the last 3 or 4 years, I've watched my Democratic colleagues across the board. Senators Hinchey, Senator Metzger when she was here, you name the senator, Senator Ramos, I've watched them hammer our farms, hammer them with policy that drive up their costs. And now, wait, here they are to the rescue, with a bunch of workers seeking asylum who we don't know anything about their background. We're going to expedite their approval process so they can help you on your farm. I would wonder if our farmers would sign up for that program without knowing exactly who they're employing. I don't know that they would. And so I would tell the governor, you've created this problem, and rather than address the real root, which is the security of people coming across, you're trying to make it worse by expediting the work process. If you can show me that you can still vet these folks the same way, and I have not been shown that or been told that by anybody in a federal position, the governor has never spent one moment. She's got a lot of experience before she was governor. She was never a customs and immigration official. She was never a part of Department of Homeland Security. So unless someone there can say we can vet these people and provide the same certitude that they are who they are, and they haven't raped, and they haven't murdered, and they haven't robbed, and they're not here to blow people up or sell drugs, if that's the case, then fine. We can look at something like that. But until then, I think we're giving up. We're trying to expedite something to get us out of a political problem of our own doing, and at the same time, I think putting these communities like Oneonta, like SUNY Cobleskill, like Niagara, like Genesee, like Onondaga, like Rockland, more in danger by doing so. Because by the way, those are the communities now that these people are going to be in with maybe a less than great security vetting process that they've gone through.
Hey, last question. I wanted to know off that a little bit. Your farm, your did come out and see they support this, right? The farm voters. Does that, you guys in your conference really been supportive of the farm? Does that,
No, it does not. The Farm Bureau rarely changes my opinion. I probably rarely change theirs. We support our farmers. I don't always support the Farm Bureau, just like I support teachers, but definitely don't always support NYSIT. Those are monolithic groups. The Farm Bureau, for the record, also supported the Farm Fair Labor Act, which they now admit has been an unmitigated disaster for them. So sometimes I think their aims are noble, and they do need workers, but I don't think this is the answer for our farms, for their member farms. I think they're trying to find areas they can work together with the governor, but I think they're gonna end up regretting if this continues on down the road here. Well, we'll do you, and then we'll go back to Kate for an off topic. I'm sorry, your name? Jamie, nice to see you.
is there any update on the situation with respect to
See, I knew if I asked enough questions that I would get to this. So I'm going to speak for our conference and as a veteran. Ms. Finch is a liar, unfortunately. And she lied about veterans, which is something that I think most people, when they heard that story, they found abhorrent in their heart, in their gut, in their very fiber of being, as did I. And then we find out it's not true. So all that means to me is that I don't know Miss Finch, is that she lied. She brought dishonor to herself, to her organization, and I would say even to some degree, because she didn't learn those values of dishonesty in the Marine Corps. I can promise you that much. So it's an unfortunate thing, and whatever comes of that, I know there's an investigation now, she's brought upon herself. But that in no way, I know my colleagues across the aisle would love to talk more about this than about the actual policy. But two things can be true. She could be a liar and make up a story, and this can be bad policy. Both are true. Nothing about the story not being true changes how I feel about the open border policy of the president, about the failure of Secretary Mayorkas to even identify it as a crisis. Nothing changes my feeling on the sanctuary cities policy in the city of New York or the executive order that Governor Cuomo signed back in 2017. Long before I ever heard of this woman, I opposed those policies then, and I oppose them now, because this is what they bring. They bring chaos, they bring disorder, and now we're exporting that to counties who did not sign up for it. It's one thing if the elected government says we want to do this, which New York City did. But it's another thing when counties that did not are then handed this problem or it's exported to them. So, but as far as, to that story, it's been discredited. It's unfortunate. Everyone up here repeated it after it was reported by multiple media outlets. Now that we know it's not true, I'm ashamed for Ms. Finch. She brought discredit upon herself and her organization, and anything she ever did to help veterans, because I don't know, maybe she did, but anything she ever did to help veterans has been now undone, because this will be her legacy, and that's a sad reality, that's a sad fact that she's brought upon herself. But it in no way changes our conference's position on the larger policy. Kate.
So this last month's session, there's a push for legislation that would mandate LGBT education within the state curriculum, and queer historic figures and different age appropriate things. What's your confidence think about that mandate?
We have not briefed that, so I'm hesitant to say what the conference position. I'd like to see the bill. Our conference has been very concerned about the trend that we see in state education policy. I suspect this will not be much different from that, meaning that when you say age appropriate, Samra Brook, who wants to teach kindergartners about sex, her definition of age appropriateness is probably different from Rob Orr's. So that's a term that I think we need to see what that age is, and talking about a historic figure is one thing, but I suspect this bill probably goes a lot further. You see this trend nationally, right? There's We want to indoctrinate. We want to push more a political philosophy towards our children at various ages. And by the way, it's turning parents off. It's turning parents off of all different groups and backgrounds, because that is not what we are failing. We're falling behind China and other countries, not because we're not teaching about LGBTQ, because we're not teaching enough STEM and science and code. That's why. That's why we're falling behind other countries like Sweden and Finland. That's where the United States is educationally. So don't kid yourself that that's the reason. It's not because kids don't know what bathroom to use or they don't know what Pride Month is. It's because we're not teaching the tools and the education for our kids to go out there and succeed. And then when they get out there, they find out, you know what, now I'm not prepared. And you know who they're mad at? They're mad at all of us. And they don't want to pay their student loans. And they don't want to, and I don't blame them, because we're not giving them the tools to succeed.
What do you think of extending essential plan coverage to undocumented residents?
What was the first part, Nick?
What do you think of extending essential plan coverage under the New York health marketplace to undocumented New Yorkers?
I'm not going to probably break any news here. I oppose it. I think our conference categorically opposes it. This again, look at, this is about, we spend $229 billion here in the state of New York. A lot of people ask me the question, why? Why is it so much more expensive to run the state of New York than it is the states of Texas or California? We actually spend 1.5 times more a person, I'm sorry, I said Texas and Florida. We actually spend more, we spend 1.5 times more per person than California. Arguably a generous state, a left-leaning state, and yet even New York spends more than they do. And the question is why? This is why. Right here is a great example of why. Because we want to spend your hard-earned money on people who don't live here, aren't residents of New York. In some cases, do not pay taxes. I know some of my colleagues, oh, they pay taxes. No, they don't. Paying taxes on the diet soda you bought or the food you bought is not the same as paying income taxes, paying property taxes. We pay some of the highest here in New York State, and it funds misguided policies like this. And that's why the people coming in don't live here and aren't citizens, and the people who are leaving and going the other direction.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.